Chapter 11. The Tailor's Clue. "There's no doubt," Joe exclaimed. "Simon's sketch tells us that Donner is the one who took Mystery." "Wait," Frank commanded. "He's drawing something else." With a series of swift, sure strokes, the mute boy surrounded his drawing of Donner and the Beagle with sketches of various dogs. A Cocker Spaniel, a German Shepherd, and 2 hounds? "What's this little one he's shading in with the pencil?" Joe asked. "A gray dog?" "Gray or brown," Frank returned. "See, he's left one ear white." "Brown with a white ear! That's Bobby Thompson's Skippy!" exclaimed Chet. "So Donner stole Skippy too?" Upon hearing the man's name, Simon raised his head once with an angry scowl, and then finished by drawing a line from each dog to Donner. Then the mute boy stood up quickly from the table. His eager eyes showed that he had something more to communicate. He pointed to Donner's picture and then to Mystery. Suddenly, Simon crouched down behind a chair and peered out. "He's trying to tell us that he was hiding. Behind a tree, perhaps?" Frank intercepted. Simon's one arm was tensed, with fingers spread as though to hold something heavy. "It's as if he's holding a rock or a club," Frank deduced. Abruptly, Simon leapt out from behind the chair. He struggled with an imaginary antagonist, swinging the hand that held the rock. Next, he seemed to clutch something else in both arms and to be running away with it. "That's Mystery he's holding now," Chet said excitedly. "He means that he waited in ambush for Donner tonight, and then hit him with a rock and ran off with Mystery himself." "Oh, great," thought a bewildered Joe. "Simon and Donner are blaming the dog stealing on each other now. Who is guilty?" While Frank and Chet, too, looked puzzled, Joe said aloud, "Well, there's one thing I want to know." He turned to Simon. "Why did you throw stones at us this afternoon?" Going to the table once more, Simon quickly produced sketches of 3 very lifelike rattlesnakes. Frowning, he looked at Frank and Joe, and made as though to push them away with his hands. "Now I get it. He was trying to warn us about those deadly snakes, not hurt us," Frank said. "Well, he sure picked a forceful way to do it." Joe rubbed his head ruefully. "Well, that would mean he didn't think we were in cahoots with Donner." Frank nodded. "Simon's giving us something to work with. It seems pretty clear that the self-styled hermit has been stealing dogs. And for my money, that ties him in with Captain Maguire's disappearance, too." "You think the captain went after the dog napper himself and ran into trouble?" Joe queried. "Well, apparently the captain had a dog," his brother reasoned. "Now suppose Donner stole the animal and Captain Maguire traced him to the hollow. Then suppose when he got down there, the captain saw something he wasn't supposed to see. And then Donner, or somebody, had to get him out of the way because he knew too much," Joe finished grimly. "Remember the blood we found in the leaves?" Absorbed in this new possibility, Frank, Joe, and Chet failed to notice that Simon had been making his way quietly toward the back door. In a moment, the tall boy had slipped quietly out the back door into the night. "Hey!" called Chet. "Stop him!" "No, let him go," said Frank Hardy calmly. "Simon's on our side, all right." "Just wish we could do something to help him," Joe put in. "With his talent for drawing, he might make out very well, in spite of his handicap. He should go to a special art school." Frank agreed, but then he said reflectively, "I can't seem to get Colonel Thunder out of my mind, and his resemblance to Donner. Also, I wonder if it could be more than coincidence that the German word for thunder is Donner. What do you say we find the carnival and talk to the colonel? He just might be a relative of Donner." "Suppose we drive to Forestburg in the morning," Joe suggested. Maybe we can learn something more about the Donner family and find out where the carnival is. Besides, it's about time we called Mother to see how things are in Bayport. Morning dawned bright and fresh after the rain. Everything seemed greener than before, and the boys' spirits rose. Frank and Joe emerged from the cabin, followed by Chet, who cradled Mystery in his arms. But suddenly Frank stopped and frowned. Oh, so much excitement last night that we forgot to put the convertible top up before the storm. Now look. Sure enough, there were puddles on the floor of the Hardys' car, and the seats, though protected by covers, were wet. The boys mopped up the water. "Let's take Captain Maguire's car," said Joe. "If the captain's enemies see it, they may think that he's escaped, and that'll bring them out into the open." The three set off with Joe at the wheel, Frank beside him, and Mystery and Chet in the rear. Apparently the back seat was comfortable, for by the time the car entered Forestburg, both Chet Morton and the Beagle were fast asleep. "Let 'em alone," Frank laughed. "Last night was too exciting, I guess. You and I can go do the detective work, Joe." The two boys walked a block to the courthouse. Because it was only 8 o'clock, the streets had little traffic. Frank and Joe, alert with curiosity, looked around. Many stores had offices above. In one window, upstairs, which Joe pointed out, was a small sign. Wyckoff Weber, attorney at law. The two brothers crossed the street to the courthouse. No one was at work yet. "Well, let's try the stores," suggested Joe. "Somebody here must know the Donners." During the next hour, the two young detectives went from shop to shop asking questions about the Donner family. Although one or two clerks or storekeepers admitted the name sounded familiar, no one could give any definite information. "I'll tell you what we're up against," said the exasperated Joe. "Some of these people are new in town, and they just don't know the Donners. The others know them but won't talk to us. We're outsiders. And they think we're prying into local affairs that aren't any of our business." "Maybe so," agreed Frank. "But there's one shop we have to visit." He indicated the tailor's establishment at the end of the block. "What for?" demanded his brother, puzzled. "I just discovered," muttered Frank, "that I have a hole in my slacks. I must have caught one of them on the rocks last night." The man with the shining bald head and thin black hair at the temples greeted them across the counter of the shop. "Yes?" "Can you mend a pair of pants while I wait?" Frank asked him. The little man smiled, showing 2 gold teeth. "Of course. Will you come in back, please?" A moment later, Frank and Joe were seated in the back room. Articles to be mended lay in a heap on the floor. Snippets of cloth were everywhere. Taking Frank's trousers, the man sat down at his work table and examined the rip. A bolt of handsome, untouched flannel drew Frank's attention. "Do you have many orders for custom-made suits?" he asked the tailor curiously. The little man sighed. "In this country, no," he answered. "Now it's all factory-made suits. There's no real work for a tailor anymore. Only patching holes and altering pants." 40 years I've had this shop," the man went on, reminiscing as he mended. "Now my main business is dry cleaning. But 20, 30 years ago, we had people that liked fine clothes, custom clothes. The Blackwells, the Altgelts, the Donners. Many fine suits I've made for them." "Donner?" repeated Frank. "Yes, the Donners. A fine old family when I first came here. A family with style, distinction. They knew good clothes. There was old Mr. Donnell, a tall, handsome man, and his wife, oh, she was stylish. And a beautiful daughter there was, and twin boys. Tall, good-looking fellows like the father. Looked so much alike you couldn't tell them apart." "Twins!" Joe exclaimed, and then he suppressed his excitement. and asked cautiously, "Must have been quite the family. What became of them?" The tailor shook his head. "Scattered. Old folks gone, of course." "The young lady?" "Well, I don't know. Mr. William, one of the twins, he left town too. Only Mr. Walter I see once in a while," the man sighed. "He doesn't dress up like he used to. Just wears sports clothes and doesn't come in here any more." In high excitement, Frank put on his mended slacks. "By the way," he asked the tailor, "do you know where Clatch's carnival is now? We've seen it once, but my brother in here would like to see the show again." Silently, the man rummaged in a wastebasket, and then handed Frank an old poster with the carnival's schedule printed on it. Elated, the boys hurried from the shop. On their way to the car, Frank stopped at an outdoor telephone booth to call his mother. "Everything's well here, Frank," came Mrs. Hardy's familiar, musical voice from Bayport. "The latest word from Dad was that the men he's after are very clever, and he hasn't made much headway on the case." Laughing, his mother added, "Iola sends her love to her brother Chet." "How about Joe?" Frank asked, grinning through the glass in the booth at his brother outside. Lively Iola Morton was Joe's date. "And Mother, have you heard from Callie lately?" Callie Shaw was Frank's own favorite girl. "Not a word. You boys had better not stay away too long, or both girls will find other escorts." When Frank left the booth, he found his brother staring across the street. Directly opposite the boys was a house with a doctor sign. "Look who's coming down the walk," Joe whispered. "It's Walter Donner." Frank's eyes followed the man, who evidently had not seen them. Donner wore a white bandage wrapped around his head. "I guess Simon really did hit him with a rock," said Joe. "Sure looks like it," Frank replied. "Let's see if we can find Clatch's carnival for a talk with Donner's double. Colonel Bill Thunder may tell us something interesting." End of chapter 11.